Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. My name is Penny Rivers, and I'm the Vice Chair of this committee, and tonight will be chairing the meeting. Members and officers, please raise your hand to indicate that you wish to speak. Please keep your microphone on mute when you are not speaking. Please keep any questions brief and to the point. And I'd like to remind ward councillors to sit separately from the committee while applications in their ward are being considered and voted on. So agenda item number 1, apologies for absence and substitutions. Kim.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from councillors David Beeman, Jane Austin and Terry Weldon, and we have councillors Peter Clark and Jerome Davidson substituting.
Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting, do they have your approval? Agreed, thank you. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Kim?
None received prior to the meeting, Chair.
And we have Councillor Morrison.
Usual Surrey Wildlife Trust.
Thank you. Agenda item 4, questions by members of the public. Kim?
None received from the public or from members, Chair.
Thank you. So we come to agenda item number 6, which is any relevant update to government guidance or legislation since the last meeting. Claire, is there any?
No, Chair, no updates.
No, thank you. So now we come to our applications. And the first one is WA 2023-00395, land at Brightwells, East Street, Farnham. The application is under section 106A of the Town and Country Planning Act to modify the legal agreement through a deed of variation to the section 106 relating to WA 2016-0268 to allow amendments to the layout of the highway along East Street. And this application is accompanied by an environmental statement. Michael, over to you to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair says, good evening, everybody. This is not a planning application. This is a deed to amend the existing section 106. This is the 5th deed on Brightwells. The application itself is set out quite clear under section 106A of the Town and Country Planning Act to modify the section 106. So what we have here is a site itself. Now here we have with the A325 and the land, it's the land immediately north of Brightwells. You can see the area in front of it's been cleared completely for the Woolmead development too. So it's this area here. The 106 for this site was to pedestrianise East Street, but have access for buses, taxis and delivery vehicles. But over time, this is now part of the larger Farnham infrastructure programme. And as such, that scheme didn't work in isolation. It had to link up with the larger network of roads within Farnham town centre. And as of that, amendments have been made, and these are the proposed amendments to the 106 to the deed. So what we have in front of you all are hard copies of the plans that have been agreed by the district, working with our county council colleagues, county highway colleagues, also Crest Nicholson, but also working with Farnham Town Council and the Farnham Society over how it all works. Now, these bullet points in front of us are the changes in the deed itself. So it's relocation of the bus stops, the widening of the footways to 3 metres in areas, an associated narrowing of the highway, in what will be a one-way system running east-west through East Street, provision of cycle parking for 16 cycles, the provision of a 2-metre loading strip for delivery vehicles, the retention of the existing control crossing, the provision of new signage, which you'll see in front of you, I think it's the last screen, the last sheet, the reinstatement of yellow lines and/or white lining. We got a late submission, it's in the report, by Farnham Town Council. Farnham was saying, as part of the site, the western part is adjacent to the conservation area, could we have narrow yellow lines on that? So County said yes. Not a problem at all. That be part of the contract. So it's narrow, it's in keeping with the yellow lining in the conservation area. And the last one is for Waverley Borough Council ourselves to actually determine the design of the bus stops. And that's going to go in the 106, in the deed itself. So they're the changes. They're what you're looking at today and what you're voting on in terms of the deed to the 106. So the plans themselves, this is the first plan. This is number 100, P15. The thing is, on screen it looks blurred. The plan in front of you is very clear in terms of notes and what and where it is. It's just the general arrangement, the east-west movement of traffic, and basically where things are in terms of pedestrian crossings. Now, there was an issue on design. The original 106 had an arc with a paving on the highway. This has been reincorporated, this has been reintroduced. This is part of that development. That is on all these drawings show that. In terms of when you're walking out of Brightwells, this is going to be in front of you. So that was important as to actually consider and retain. So that's 100 P15. That's the general arrangement plan. All these plans will be listed in the deed. The next plan is the rigid swept path analysis, basically proving that a large vehicle can turn safely from Woolmead into East Street. And those plans show exactly that and how that works. The next plan again is large vehicles turning round through Dogflood, way through Woolmead and onto East Street. There won't be any clipping of any sort of curbing, any buildings be hit. It's quite safe, and it's a one-way system, as I said, through East Street. The next, the levels and the contours, again, they'll work. They've been re-engineered. Site clearance, drainage layout, which is important as well, where the drains are going and how it works, and connections. Service materials and curbing. The legal general arrangement for lawyers like Lewis on my left, how that all works. And the traffic signs and the traffic markings for road users, both vehicles, cycling and walking safely, and what they are and how they work. And the next it's just the issues. This scheme is an integral part of the Farnham Infrastructure Programme. So the town centre improvements, including strategic changes to traffic junctions and traffic flows. As part of the submission, we've an updated traffic assessment was submitted, an updated air quality report has been submitted, and an updated noise report, which have been compared with the findings of the original environmental statement in the EIA Statement of Conformity, which has also been considered and submitted as part of the application and found to be acceptable. That's everything, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. We have two speakers. We have Councillor Hyman on screen and Councillor Andy MacLeod following that. You each have 4 minutes. So if Jerry is ready.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chairman. This is not complicated. The application is a subsequent application for EIA development. It's a fact, but it hasn't been advertised and consulted upon as such, and the Brightwells environmental statement isn't available, hence the law prohibits the granting of consent. Of course, the main purpose of the S106 variation is to secure measures to mitigate the highways impacts of the Brightwells housing and retail development, but no such mitigation is proposed. It instead removes the promise of high quality pedestrianised public realm, improved accessibility and a cycleway, to replace it just with a promise of traffic congestion so severe that it'll force residents to walk and cycle regardless of their needs or the weather. It needs the due EIA scrutiny. It's not just a technicality. We all want better pedestrian conditions, but Farnham needs alternative routes first. The application officer report here make it clear that this proposal is an integral part of the Farnham Infrastructure Programme, for which the detailed design is still awaited, and which proposes harmful impacts that themselves require mitigation, which is yet to be identified. To permit Brightwells without mitigation, frankly, would be madness. Hence, we find ourselves in a position where the impacts of the proposals, particularly those on traffic, air quality, emergency service response times, bus timetables, and perhaps most importantly, the viability of local retail and service businesses, have not been assessed in a properly updated environmental statement, as the law demands. So the SCC position and the officer report state their reliance upon Surrey Highways claim that the combined East Street and FIP proposals have been satisfactorily modelled in Paramix, yet they won't demonstrate the modelling. Remarkably, the new transport assessment, which was published only last Wednesday, makes no mention of the modelling whatsoever, instead merely pretending that there will be no impact. So Crest's evasion of EIA has deprived the public of their rights to scrutinise, assess and compare the impact of these proposals with the previously consented proposals. Vital documents which the council is legally required to take into account in its decisions are simply not available. Now in East Street itself, the relocation of the bus stops to the end of the street around a blind corner is really dangerous, as buses will be pulling out blind into moving traffic, unable to see them in the mirrors, potentially forcing cars to mount the opposite pavement to avoid collision. The unnecessary relocation of the bus stops would also blight the adjacent businesses, and with the only beneficiary, of course, being Crest Nicholson. In changing the application description, as members will have noticed, the council's publicly admitted that this is EIA development beyond doubt, such that the environmental statement for the scheme and all subsequent further information must be provided, advertised and consulted upon for 30 days, but the council apparently has no intention of doing so. In the absence of a complete environmental statement detailing the proposals, the effectiveness of the FIP mitigation and the Paramix modelling, the committee can't possibly assess the impact and policy compliance of the development proposals, and nor can the head of planning. The granting of consent is prohibited in accordance with sections 3 and 20 of the regulations, and it's contrary to paragraph 192 of the MPPF as well, which requires compliance with the Air Quality Action Plan. But most importantly, we know that if the head of planning had any intention of determining this lawful, he should have notified Crest that it's EIA development at the time that the description was changed, which he chose not to. That's not good. So that said, the head of planning is not recommending that you, the committee, grant consent unlawfully yourselves. She's instead asking that you allow her to grant consent. Of course, as councillors, we're required to ensure the council acts lawfully, and the head of planning has no authority to ask us to allow it to act unlawfully, and were we to do so, we would be complicit. Yeah, it's not good. So, members, rather than risk the future of our town and our local businesses, I would simply respectfully ask that you move to defer your decision and instruct the head of planning to notify Crest that it is EIA development, as should have been done long ago. And of course, to ensure due scrutiny, you could also request the public demonstration of the base and with development Paramix modelling, perhaps at the Town Council's annual public meeting on April 22nd. So please do move to defer your decision, instruct the head of planning to notify Crest that it's EIA development. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. That's your 4 minutes. So Councillor MacLeod, you also have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, members of the committee. I'm speaking to the members this evening as the Waverley Councillor for Moore Park, but also as the Surrey County Councillor for Farnham Central, which includes the Brightwells and East Street areas. Lastly, I think it's relevant also that I'm the chairman of the Brightwells Board. The Brightwell Board is the only vehicle for Surrey, Crest, Waverley and Farnham Town Council to meet together to try to resolve the extraordinary difficulties that come up in this very complex scheme. And we do have some success in achieving that, although it's a bit like herding cats on occasion. The main build of the Brightwells development is now almost complete and now partially open after the 21-year period since Crest was appointed as a developer in 2003. Crest now wish to achieve practical completion this summer and the handover of the commercial part of the scheme to Surrey for a potential opening event before Christmas. Any further delays in East Street's work would jeopardise this plan and would also be unhelpful in securing tenants for the retail and restaurant units in Brightwells. It would also impact on the start of the FIP Town Centre scheme, which is due to start in the autumn, as it would not be possible to carry out these two projects at the same time. Now, there are some understandable objections to the scheme, which I would like to briefly comment on. The Farnham Society, as you see in your papers, would like to see the original traffic plan for development for Brightwells with two-way traffic behind the Woolmead to allow partial pedestrianisation of East Street. The FIP team under Chris Tunstall decided in 2021 that it would not be sensible to proceed on this basis, as the officers had indicated to you, until the FIP plan for the town centre was also decided. Also, the original planning permission was over 12 years old, and traffic volumes and the sizes of vehicles have continued to increase, so there's no guarantee that the original scheme would still work, particularly due to the additional phases in the traffic lights which would be necessary at the Royal Deer Junction. There are further uncertainties connected to the Wildenmead development which still exists today. We still don't know what will happen on the north side of East Street, as Berkeley Homes has not yet decided whether or not they'll build out their permitted scheme. As the Surrey Councillor, I agree with and support the concept of a much simpler East Street improvement scheme, which is developed into the one before you today. This changes very little, actually. It leaves the traffic flows much as they are today, but focuses on improving the pedestrian experience by widening the pavements, using better materials and so on. It doesn't actually preclude the potential future development of a partial pedestrian of East Street in a future phase of the FIP. I also understand the concerns of the business owners of the east end of East Street about the relocation of the bus stop and the bus shelter. However, Surrey has decided there's no real alternatives to that. It can't be left where it currently is if it's to widen the pavements and so on, and it's not suitable to move it to the west end of the street because that end of the street has to stay as two lanes approaching the traffic lights. The last thing I'll briefly comment on is on Jerry's comments, actually. Jerry was one of the advocates of actually leaving the scheme much as it is and not the two-way scheme behind the Wildenmead, but he's now campaigning against the scheme that he previously supported. I know that's for other reasons, complicated reasons to do with EIA and so on, and I really don't have time to comment on that. I have to leave that to the officers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacLeod. Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I just wanted to clarify something. Delighted as I was to hear from Councillor MacLeod. Is East Street not in Castle Ward now?
East Street is in Castle Ward. I'm not speaking as the ward councillor. I won't be coming back at the end of the meeting. I'm speaking actually as a Waverley councillor who also happens to be a Surrey County councillor.
Sorry, Councillor MacLeod, I thought you said you were ward member, but I wouldn't mind if you did speak it twice. I mean, it's not that. It's just for clarity, because it says Moore Park in our papers, but of course it is no longer in Moore Park, as far as I know. It's in Castle.
That's absolutely
Thank you,
correct.
Madam Mayor. Sorry, Madam Chairman, sorry about that.
That's all right. Did you want to comment further?
Eventually, yes.
Yes, well, the floor is open to all of you now, so open to debate. Councillor Coburn.
Yes, while I'm pointing at the microphone. Yes, well, I agree with everything Councillor MacLeod says, so why wouldn't I want him to say it twice? Basically, you know, that this scheme has been around, as we all know, for ages and ages. Some of us have grown old with it, you know, and this is relatively small change at this stage. Obviously, as you're building something out, even in much smaller schemes, you come in for changes because things change. A scheme of this was bound to have, of this size, was bound to have changes. And quite frankly, I can't see any reason not to just go along with what's been described by the officers. A little bit worried when it said Waverley's going to design the bus stops. Can we have a little bit of input into that? I mean, I don't know who designs our bus stops, but I didn't know that we had a bus stop specialist, and I would hope that the Town Council and the Farnham Society and one or two other people would have a say in the bus stops. I hate very modern bus stops. I suppose I've got a prejudice I ought to declare. You know, we are on the edge of the conservation area. Delighted that we're going to do, I presume we're doing them in primrose rather than bright yellow as well as narrow. Keep it sort of looking good, but we do want our bus stops to be of a reasonable quality as well. So if we could just make sure, but apart from that, just mere details, I think we're going to gain from this rather than lose. And I hope that awful bit of the town, and let's be honest, I mean, the Woolby was never a thing of beauty. That end of East Street was, you know, never a classical part of Farnham, that I hope at the end of this that we actually end up with that street looking better, neater, and certainly more pedestrian friendly. So I'm all for this change to the, want to delegate the powers.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you'll be relieved by what Claire is about to say.
Yeah, just to confirm, as able as the planning team is, we don't design bus shelters. So what we want to do is just be involved in agreeing the details of that.
That is to agree the details of the design of the bus shelters. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Clark.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments. One of the earlier speakers mentioned this was going to create congestion to force people out of their cars. Well, as a driver that drives down East Street frequently, there are 2 lanes at present, but only one of them is really used. The other one is barely used at all. So I can't see much difference there. And the second point is that there is another bus stop next to the sports centre, and it would be interesting to know which of these two bus stops are the most frequented, because it could be that a shelter would be of more use in the bus stop in Dogflood. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rubini.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, as the other speakers said, I was involved in this in 2003, and it had already started before that, so it's been going on a huge time. I certainly wouldn't want to see a deferment tonight to take even longer. As far as this is concerned, it does seem to improve a number of things, and it's not just the bus stops. I welcome the inclusion of the cycle stops as well. And I noticed that Barnham Town Council, the highways, are all in full agreement with this, and they are the local people. So as far as I'm concerned, I would fully support this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands. So we'll move to the recommendation. And the recommendation is that delegated authority be granted to the Executive Head of Planning Development to authorise the deed of variation to the original Section 106 agreement. All those in favour, please vote when the lights show green is yes, red is no. Thank you very much. That is carried unanimously. We move to the next application, which is WA 2023-02494, land at Pinewood, Whitmead Lane, Tilford. Anna, this is Anna's first planning meeting, so please everybody be very kind.
Outbuilding. Oops, thank you. Thank you. So it's in the green belt, and the site is outlined in red, and shown are the existing buildings, the house and the garage. The garage is shown at the photograph at the top. It's 5.2 metres high and 7 metres by 9 metres, just to gauge the scale there. The proposed building is about 5 metres high and 14.6 metres by 6 metres. And that's proposed in this position in front of the mature Scots pines here. There has been submitted a arboricultural impact assessment, which concludes there would be no impact on the trees. This is the proposed site plan. So the building is proposed in the front garden opposite the garage there. This is the proposed building, so it's 15 metres across the widest part of the roof here, and then about 1.8 metres projecting log store, and also projecting open porch. Inside there's a garden store which is accessible internally, and through an external door, a full bathroom, and a larger garden studio room with 2 fireplaces and 2 access doors. So the history of the planning on the site, there is a refused application which is very similar to the proposal, almost exactly the same position and the same building, also 5 meters high. Like the application proposal, I think the planning application measurements given was 4.91 meters in height, but that seems to be from the finished floor level. It scales at 5 meters from ground level. And that was refused because of the impact on the green belt. So that one was 5 meters high. There are also a number of permissions on the site, planning permissions and certificates of lawfulness. Firstly, the triple garage, which has been implemented on site, 5.2 meters high and 7 by 9 meters. There is an unimplemented certificate of lawfulness for 2 buildings, one of which is similar to the proposal, but it is only 4 meters high and would have been situated in the back garden. And that was included in that certificate of lawfulness was a second smaller outbuilding in the back garden. There is then an unimplemented and expired planning permission for a large building in the front garden. That's shown positioned here. So it's similar to the application, but it's only 4 meters high. And then subsequently to that, a further certificate of lawfulness was applied for a further building in the rear garden, 7 meters by 7 meter L-shaped, in approximately this position. And subsequently to that, a planning permission for a similar building, similar proportions, but it had a veranda, so required planning permission, and that was granted. So the key issues are it's a new building in the green belt. So the national and local policy is that new buildings are not appropriate in the green belt unless they are a specific type of development which is listed as an exception within paragraphs 154 and 155 of the NPPF, which it is not. Or unless there are very special circumstances, which in this case there is not. So the planning authority must therefore refuse the application in line with the policy unless there are material planning considerations which indicate otherwise. There is a previous refusal on the site for a very similar development. There has been an objector who is concerned about the possible commercial use by Acquire, but the proposal is for incidental or ancillary domestic use only, which would not be likely to harm residential amenity. Due to the high quality construction and design and the siting within the residential plot, there would be little impact on the AONB, AGLV or visual amenity. And the arboricultural impact assessment concludes that there would be no detrimental impact on the nearby mature Scots pine. These are neutral factors that you'd expect of any proposed development. They're not mitigating factors weighing in favour of the development. So the recommendation is for refusal on the basis of harm to the openness of the green belt. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. We also have 2 speakers on this. We have Mr. Connier Lydius and Mr. Redman. So if our first speaker is ready. Yeah.
Yes, good evening. Good evening, Chair, members of the Planning Committee. My name is Nicholas Connier-Lidis. Thank you for this opportunity to say a few words regarding my objection to the application for the detached outbuilding at Pinewood in Tilford. While I understand the applicant's desire for additional space, as the immediate neighbour to the site, I have significant concerns which I believe warrant the refusal of this application, and I hope the committee supports the reviewing officer's recommendation for refusal. Firstly, the site is located in the Greenbelt, an area designated for protection where new buildings should only be allowed under certain circumstances. The proposal is for a substantial building measuring nearly 15 metres long, 5 metres high, and approximately a footprint of 90 metres squared. The construction of the new domestic outbuildings is not allowed under any of the exceptions set out in the National Planning Policy Framework. Approvals should only be granted if very special circumstances are demonstrated and that they clearly outweigh the harm to the openness of the greenbelt. In this application, no very special circumstances exist. The submitted design and access statement suggests that a previous approval for an outbuilding in 2020 is a fallback position, and that would constitute a very special circumstance. This is not the case, as the consent has now expired and cannot be lawfully implemented. The officer's report states that the renewal of this permission is unlikely and cannot be relied on as a fallback position, and that in any case, the proposal would be more harmful to the openness of the greenbelt due to its increased height. It therefore would constitute inappropriate development. Furthermore, this isn't the first time an outbuilding has been proposed in this very spot. A previous application, nearly identical in size and location, was actually refused due to its impact on the greenbelt. It seems the applicant is hoping this time will be different, but without addressing the core issue, the harm to the greenbelt. This application falls short and fails to address any of the fundamental issues. The proposal is a substantial outbuilding, positioned very close to the shared boundary with Open. For context, the building's gross internal floor area would be larger than the minimum space standard for a 3-bedroom single-story house. While amendments were made to move the building 1 meter further away from the boundary, the building is still only around 5 meters away. Due to the size of the building, its position will lead to a feeling of encroachment and overdevelopment of the plot. Pinewood is already served by a number of ancillary buildings, including a 3-bay garage with accommodation in the roof space, and planning consent has been granted for a swimming pool and a pool house. The addition of a further sizable structure would clearly disrupt the character of the area. The proposed use of the building is not clear. Submitted plans are labelled simply as a garden studio, but objections have raised the possibility for activities like choral practices, which could disrupt the peace of the neighbourhood and disturb the surrounding wildlife. Additionally, the building's 2 proposed fireplaces raise concerns about potential smoke and fumes further impacting the local environment. In conclusion, the proposal constitutes an inappropriate development as no very special circumstances have been demonstrated to outweigh the harm to the openness of the greenbelt. Planning permission was refused in 2020 for a building of the same size and appearance as the scheme before you, as it caused unacceptable harm to the openness of the greenbelt. And there is no reason to conclude that the current application will not cause similar harm. The cumulative impact of the proposal, existing and consented structures on the site all point to a highly inappropriate development. I therefore urge the committee to uphold the officer's recommendation and refuse application WA 2023-02494 and protect the character of the greenbelt and the surrounding neighbourhood. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Koniolidis. And now I call upon Mr. Redmond to speak in support. Thank you. You have 4 minutes, Mr. Redmond.
Madam Chair, councillors and members, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to the committee to clarify some of the issues that have been raised in the letters of representation. I, along with my wife, are the applicants and live at Pinewood with our family. It's a family home. We are investing in our family home of 8 years, where we relax away from our very busy lives. And we've done everything lawfully and with the correct permissions, as you will see from the planning history. Pinewood is a substantial family dwelling located within generous grounds. The largest part of the garden is to the front, the west, the southern side of the dwelling, due to the dwelling's positioning on the site and its separation distance from Whitmead Lane. The dwelling and garden are not visible from the road. We consider the committee report commentary on the size and positioning of the building to be, for want of a better word, misleading. The proposal is for a building that would be clearly subservient and well related to the dwelling. Whilst to the front of the dwelling, this part of the garden is private and subsequently it's well used due to being south facing, directly accessible by the double doors leading from the drawing room. The proposal would be positioned to the south of the drawing room and would be clearly visually linked to the dwelling using landscaping. The proposal would not be prominent within the surrounding landscape. Indeed, the committee report sets out that the intrinsic beauty of the AONB and the AGLV would not be harmed. As you will have seen, we have already been granted a planning permission for an outbuilding in a very similar position to the one now under consideration, and there is an excellent certificate of lawfulness for an alternative outbuilding. The only difference between this new proposal and the previously permitted one is the increase of the ridge height of 0.9 of a metre and the proximity to our side boundary, which has been reduced by 1.9 metres. We wanted to raise the height to improve the appearance of the building, and with the amount of land we have, moving the building less than 2 metres is not significant. There would still be a minimum of 5 metres to the boundary and 26 metres to the nearest corner of Openwood. We wish to nudge the originally permissioned building, which we've worked with this application, back to keep the garden and views open. We don't consider the difference in position and height between the previously approved and certificated PD outbuilding to be sufficient to warrant refusal of this application. We also consider the suitably worded condition to remove PD rights or a unilateral undertaking would overcome the concern of additional outbuildings in the future. This approach has been taken by officers in the past. This commitment shows that we do not wish to overdevelop the site, and our planning history is actually a catalogue of our exploring how to get our home right within the rules. The building itself is a garden room and store. Its use would be incidental to the enjoyment of the house and does not include any primary accommodation. Contrary to the letters of objection, the building is not big enough for the purposes of our business. We rent an office for our team in Farnham, and Pinewood is our very much needed retreat. We are sad that the proposal has resulted in 5 letters of objection, with 4 from the same household, but we are truly heartened by the additional tremendous level of support in the same vein. We hope that you will see that the revised positioning of the building, its pretty design, ancillary use and tree protections show care taken to meet all the regulations and ensure the building is right for the site that we know and love. This will ensure that the proposal not be harmful to our neighbours and impact on the Greenbelt will be no different to that associated with the actually previously approved and now lapsed scheme. We therefore respectfully request that you vote in favour of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Redman. Thank you. So, members, the debate is open for any speakers. Councillor Coburn.
You'll be delighted to know, Anna, that I think your report was very good, and I agree with what you say, and I agree with your conclusion. We have very little land that we can really protect. It's getting less and less, and we have always tried to protect our green belt because, as I say, so little else is backed so forcibly by government guidance. Things move on, and I just feel with this application that this really is just too big for greenbelt development. It's as simple as that. I can't see any very special circumstances. Much as I try, I can understand what the applicant is trying to do, but the house sits within the green belt. You know, it is different from a house that, like we live in, which doesn't sit in anything like as nice a situation as the green belt. You know, and you have to look at policy and what the policy is for. And we have tried desperately in this committee and in previous committees to maintain that green belt. I take all the other points, and the planning officer very wisely said, you know, there are neutral impacts, not necessarily material impacts of other matters. We are looking really at this. Is this too big in the green belt? Will it actually harm the openness and the natural nature of the green belt? And I have to say, I feel if we start chipping away at our own policy, especially with the stronger now policy in the NPPF, then I think we are going to open ourselves up to a lot of development that we really don't want. So I'm sorry, because I feel for the applicant, but the house sits within Greenbelt, and I think we should protect Greenbelt. Thank you.
I've just realised I know the applicant, so I will be abstaining.
Are there, oh, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I, like Councillor Coburn, have great sympathy for the applicant. I don't know him. I think any family who are trying to improve where they live, it has got to be commended. And I would hope that if the committee does uphold the refusal, that perhaps the applicant could speak with the case officer concerned and get gauge some sort of judgment on what would be acceptable in future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Are there any other speakers? No. So we come to the recommendation. The recommendation is that permission be refused. When the lights show, please vote green for yes and red against and blue in the middle to abstain.
Sorry, I'm being right. Is it yes to refuse?
Yes to refuse. To support the recommendation, you press green.
Thank you, Chair. That's 9 in favour of refusal, 3 abstaining and none against.
That is carried. Thank you.
Sorry.
And now we come to the next recommendation, which is agenda item number 11, which is WA 2023-02591, land at 15 and 16 Pathfield, Chiddingfold, an application under Regulation 4 for erection of 5 dwellings with associated works following the demolition of 2 bungalows, together with the provision of an access road and parking to serve the dwellings. Michael.
So this is a Regulation 3 development. This is the district council, the borough council itself as a housing provider providing development. So the description will be amended when the decision goes out. It's a Regulation 3. It's one of our own developments working with Feltham Construction. They're the contractors. This is a renewal of planning permission. The planning permission lapsed. So everything you see today has been rehearsed in the past. And it's a win-win for everybody. It's 5 affordable houses in Chiddingfold in terms of housing need. The site itself is here. It's basically these 2 bungalows, 15 and 16, will be demolished and replaced by 3 houses, almost like townhouses, and 2 apartments. So the flats look like a house. They're 2-storey. So 2 flats, one on the ground floor, one on the first floor. This is the site itself, just off Pathfield in the corner. The block plans. This is the plan of the existing. Detail of the proposal with the three houses together, terrace houses, and the separate apartment building. Floor plans. This is the view at the moment. Basically, there's a screen, there's a contractor fencing up in front of it, and it's screened. You have to look over that to actually see what it is and where it is. It's a derelict, unsightly, empty, 2 empty units in Chiddingfold. And that's the back of the site, a large area of land. And these are the issues. Provision of 5-year affordable homes, redevelopment of a brownfield windfall site in the village of Chiddingfold. It's a renewal of the permission that's lapsed, which was in 2019, so it's pre-COVID. So it's proposed for a mix for 3 2-bedroom, 4-person houses, 1 2-bed, 4-person ground floor flat, and 1 1-bed, 2-person first floor flat, replacing 2 bungalows. So the council is supportive of smaller units, which will make a better use of council's assets and increase the council's capacity to meet housing need. So it's basically renewing an application for much needed housing in Chiddingfold, ma'am. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker, Councillor Dave Busby, who is the ward councillor, and he is also on screen. Is he ready? You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep my comments very brief, as I'm hopeful that this will be a relatively straightforward decision for committee members, given that the application is, as Mike says, essentially a renewal of permission previously granted in 2020. As members will know, the 5 new sustainable and energy efficient homes proposed here form part of a wider redevelopment of 5 council-owned sites across Chiddingfold, which will deliver a total of 26 much needed and very welcome affordable homes. In recent months, I have been very pleased to see activity get underway on other sites in the village, which I'm sure has also come as a relief to residents nearby, who've been incredibly patient. And I'm looking forward to seeing that continue at Parfield in the near future. The very minor changes to the design from the permission granted in 2020 do not give me any cause for concern. And this application will bring the proposal in line with current building regulations and environmental standards. I do just want to note that parking in Parfield is a significant problem. And although I am hopeful that this proposal may somewhat alleviate the situation with off-street parking for the new homes and the addition of 5 replacement parking spaces for existing neighbouring properties, careful consideration will need to be given as to how this is managed during construction, as well as any further measures that can be introduced to improve the parking situation in the area. And finally, I'd just like to say a very quick thank you to the planning officers, the housing development team and everyone else involved in progressing this very exciting project across the village. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Busby. So again, the floor is open for debate, councillors. Councillor Coburn.
Yes, I started reading this and I thought, this looks familiar, this sounds familiar. And it was only when I turned the page over and told that we'd already looked at this and given it permission that I realised, could we have that on the front page next time? I really thought I was going mad. I thought, I'm sure we've done this. So, yes, I mean, why on earth would you speak against it? Apart from the parking, and Councillor Busby is absolutely right, it isn't great down there. And, you know, when I did read what is suggested, I was a little sceptical, simply because, you know, there's only so much road you can play with. But no, I think this is excellent for Chiddingfold, and I look forward to seeing that awful site, you know, finally developed and turned into good homes. So, no problem with this at all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? No. So we have the recommendation that, subject to conditions 1 to 20 and informatives 1 to 13, permission be granted. Please vote now. Thank you. That's carried unanimously. So that is the end of the meeting, but I would like to thank Anna very much. And often meetings are a bit longer. So thank you all very much. And that is the end of the meeting.